All right, this is it. This is the final Saw film for you to experience, considering that, yes, we have first experienced Spiral together
I
in the
know.
theater,
We
and
kind
then
of
took you
went in
back, and,
reverse.
and then took you back to the very beginning, and then now here we are. Now, this is Jigsaw from 2017. This is, of course, 7 years after the quote unquote final chapter of the Saw franchise, in which, in a sense, I mean, we always say that it's like, oh yeah, it's always like the final chapter. It never really is. But I mean, yeah, they say that, but then whatever comes next, in a sense, is just kind of still starting anew to an extent. And this, unlike Spiral, I mean, this obviously has more closer ties to that original timeline, and we'll get into all of that. But I would say something like a Spiral is more, as far as the look and feel, is more reminiscent of the older ones. And that's the thing about this one, is that it was kind of meant to be like a soft reboot, like a reintroduction, all of it, but kind of doing its own thing. And yeah, throughout most of the film, you kind of get the sense that it is, something different, as far as, especially because the look of it, because you look at this one and it's very much a more modern look, because it is meant to take place 10 years after the death of the John Kramer character. And so you have it's very kind of CSI looking. Everything's cleaner.
Yeah,
The,
actually, now that you mention it.
yeah, like the police station and everything, and the technology. They have lasers and shit now that cut through the bodies and stuff. And yeah, everyone's very pretty and into it. And so yeah, so yeah, you start off with this chase. This one guy, he's kind of, the suspect. Police are going after him, and then you see that he's involved with something that he's a component to kind of start a new game. And then with that situation, he gets shot, and then we kind of start going into the whole, we have a barn setting, and so it has where we start with 5 people, kind of reminiscent of like a Saw 5 or whatever, and they have to kind of go through their own series of tests. And so we don't really know what exactly the deal is, like who is doing this. Is it Jigsaw? Is it someone else? What's the components here? And so with that said, just kind of having experienced this film and the others, and knowing that it's different, but not really. Like, how did you feel about it, and what were you kind of maybe expecting?
Um, I don't know that I really went into any of these with expectations, because obviously things change. I mean, like the last couple with Psycho Dude, I'm like, he's gonna get his comeuppance for real. But anyway, I mean, we're past that now.
Mm-hmm.
That was about the only expectation I ever had out of all these, except that, okay, the traps are gonna be pretty cool, because that's what I at least knew from the get go. But for this one in particular, I don't really know. I just know at the end I was really confused. I was trying to. I mean, I know what happened, obviously, but it was just confusing, the process.
Yeah, this all series has always left people confused in some way, shape, or form. Especially as it goes on with certain endings, you're just like, wait, what? What's happening? Huh? Is he? Huh? Who's that? I don't know.
Well, because it was 3 and 4 that were kind of going on at the same time, and there was like a back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
But this was a really big back and forth, a big spread, and that's what really like threw me. I'm like, wait, what? And but yeah, trying to make the little connections from the little clues that they dropped, and I'm just like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, it's basically retreading water from Assault 2, where we're messing with the time frame of things, and all the Saw films do that to some degree or another. I mean, because you go back to the first one, obviously, you see films like that where it's the more straightforward option, where, yeah, you have these guys locked in a room, and they're, having to figure out their situation, and with that, they're going back and forth with their knowledge. Take things back to before and just kind of put the pieces along as you go along, blah blah blah. Where Saw 2, that was more of like the twist element, obviously, because they had the game going on while he was talking to Jigsaw, but that just took place only mere hours beforehand, and they're just kind of watching a live feed, so that played out well.
Yeah,
this
that
one,
I could figure.
yeah, this one is definitely. I mean, the way that they execute it is, yeah, you're thinking like, okay, all of this is going on, within the same time frame, especially going out throughout the film, because the cops are like finding these bodies that are a result of the game that you see happening. Like, so you'll see a game going on, you'll go through that segment, someone dies, you cut to the next part, cops are finding that body supposedly, out in the open somewhere, and you're just like, what is going on here? And it's like, okay, like, what's their end game, and what message are they trying to send, and to who. And so, yeah, it kind of takes that and definitely completely takes it to like times 10 as far as the actual time frame in which these events are taking place. So yeah, with that, I mean, so our characters throughout this one, you have a coroner, a coroner guy named Logan, and he's more or less kind of like the sole focus of this film, is on the opposite side from the people actually in the game. And you have his like partner, this one woman that works with him, and you have these other two cops, one named O'Halloran and the other one I forget, which is his partner. He's just kind of there. I mean, there's not really much to him, but I mean, for what he was worth, he was a cool guy or whatever. And so, yeah, the one cop is kind of like is the dickhead, and so you're just looking at this, and you're like, okay, well, this has some ties to him, what's going on with them. And so as far as like the characters, like them and the people in the game, which you have 5, one gets knocked out early, as you see, supposedly gets taken out early, and then you have these other 4. So as far as like the characters and all that, how did you feel as how they stacked up with previous people throughout?
Like throughout the series as a whole, or
yeah, or just like in as far as like this film goes, did you like the characters at all? Did you think they were boring or funny or anything?
Well, it was like the other it. See, I can't remember the numbers of the movie associated with the certain particular traps, but
yeah, that's fine.
It was reminiscent of 2 was the live feed of the house, sort of, and
when they were all in the house.
It was like a mix of that, and then
I'd say like Saw 5 probably, where it was like the 5 and they were kind of going through all the each rooms, and
then it came down to 2, and then they had to put their arms in the thing at the end. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was like a mix of those 2 for me.
Yeah.
They weren't like boring. I didn't exactly have connections with all of them, but then at the same time, I was, it wasn't like I didn't give a dang at all. You're trying to figure out, what all their interconnections are, because they obviously have some connection to each other. Mm-hmm. That's how this works. And you're just following along, and I mean, it's like any other John Kramer sort of trap thing. You want them to hopefully make it and succeed, and see what happens afterwards. So, I mean, I didn't feel a particularly strong way, one way or the other, towards any of them. They serve their purpose,
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, with this one, I would say one thing I can appreciate about it, I mean, because first of all, I do like the look of it, even though, like, I mean, it's called Jigsaw, it's not just Saw, and it's meant to take place, even though it came out 7 years after the fact, 10 years after the death of the main character and all of this. And so, like I said, everything is like sleeker looking, and so they go for like all that different look overall, But as far as like the visual quality and everything, and I thought the film does look nice and all of that. And so with this one as well, as far as the people that are going through the game, I can appreciate the fact though that each one. Even though, like, you may say, like, maybe one or two stories might have stretched a little bit, but as far as the motivations for them being in the trap are actually because they had something to do that directly involves someone losing their life, as opposed to maybe something that's a little lesser. You may think like, oh, well, that person shouldn't be in the trap. That was the thing, at least, because you would think like, okay, I can understand why they are definitely in this situation. I mean, they've all done some pretty shitty things. Like the first girl that goes out that you see with the acid and the needle that they had to choose and everything. Like, she just robbed a woman and she got only like a couple of bucks and some change out of that whole situation because she had her inhaler in the purse and everything. She took it away from her, and so yeah, that woman, she has a jacked up death though. I mean,
oh god, that was that was pretty gross.
Yeah,
it's not one of those ones that gives you the creepy crawlies like the rack.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, it's not really like too intense, but like the end result, you see it where like her flesh and everything is just kind of like pulsating and it's like puffy and all of that, like from the acid in her body and everything, and so it's freak. Although she was definitely pretty stupid. I mean, they all were, because they had the numbers like embedded on the needle, on the syringe, and so it's just like, oh yeah, what these numbers mean, and she said those, like, so. Oh yeah, she's like, what, like $3 and something cents or whatever, and it's just like, well, clearly that's the needle you need to stick yourself with, as opposed to the other two. It'd be like, you could have just done that, but she was all freaking out and shit.
Yeah, I was curious as to what the other numbers meant.
No, they're just random. It's just like, okay, you just gotta make your call. It's like, okay, well, what number means what to you? And that was the one. It's just like, well, obviously.
Yeah, that I guess suppose.
Process of elimination. Just obvious. Think like what like.
But you couldn't help but wonder. Okay, these numbers must have some sort of significance.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're looking at them, it's like, well, this one's odd because it's like the smallest one there. What the heck?
Yeah.
That you're kind of drawn to it right away.
Yeah, things like that. But like for the game, for what it was it was an interesting one. I do say, like, I like the one guy throughout the film that's just kind of like in that one like jacket sweater. The one, he was like kind of semi comic relief. I feel like he was like the most entertaining of the bunch. Because it's like the one line he has, like when the puppet first like kind of rolls out, he's just like, no, that's not creepy at all, and shit like that.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so that's
pretty good.
Yeah. And so like kind of going through them and everything. You have like the one dude. He's just kind of like a this younger black dude. And eventually, with his game that he goes through, we'll get to that in a bit. He gets quite an interesting little death there. But yeah, the next bit is like I mean, this one, you kind of have to, like, suspend disbelief a little bit more because of how, like, on point Jigsaw is in this one. Like, the fact that he knew this guy would try to go through that door, and his foot falls through the hole, and then, and it's caught in there, and he has, like, the TV in there set up, talking to him directly and stuff. So it's definitely, like, expanding that whole, like, John, oh, yeah, he knows all. He can anticipate these possibilities.
Oh, yeah.
So
some people are absolutely 1,000% predictable. Yeah. And apparently this guy was.
Yeah, because they have to go into this room, and it's just like all this like grain coming down on them, and then eventually all these like random like saw blades and like pitchforks start falling on them and shit.
Yeah, that was crazy.
And he has to pull the thing, or his legs got to get severed, or else they're gonna die, and it's just.
Yeah, that was definitely the two of those things combined were kind of crazy. The leg thing, you can kind of imagine closely if you've ever like tripped over something and gotten tangled up. Yeah. It's like, okay, that kind of sucks. And then, well, you can't really imagine being in a silo getting covered in the grain with the junk falling on you, but holy cow, yeah.
Because even that, it's just like the likelihood that
it's just a game of chance, really.
Yeah, exactly.
You could have that freaking saw blade just fall straight down. On
a lot of this film in particular definitely involves a lot more chance than even probably some previous ones. But it's just like, I mean, for what it was though, like I said, I like the people in the game kind of going through that. Like, again, like the one guy in particular, I felt like he kind of helped hold it together a little bit more. Like he just had a little something there that just kind of made the group a bit more entertaining. Kind of watched them go through it in a sense, if you see what I'm saying. But
The guy with his leg trap.
yeah,
Right?
yeah, like I don't know. I just feel like he was kind of the standout of it. But I mean, so on the flip side, I mean, like I say, you have the one coroner guy kind of going through this, and we don't really know what tie. I mean, we know that, like I said, he's doing what he's doing now. He was like a vet, or, he's been through the war and stuff like that. And again, you have the one cop kind of going through and investigating, and you're just kind of, and then his partner, like of the coroner, you have the one redheaded girl, and then they introduced this idea that's like you know an online fan group of like Jigsaw and stuff, and basically they have like old plans and stuff that they found, and basically like in their spare time they can just rebuild traps of his, and they have this moment where they go to like this warehouse that she has like set up, and all this like random like Saw stuff from the past that you see is like rebuilt because she's like a Jigsaw fangirl. It's like, so how did you feel about that element
That was
being introduced? Like,
that was interesting for sure. I mean, you hope that she doesn't actually do that stuff or use the things, but I mean,
yeah, they're definitely playing with your expectations for us. I'd be
you
like,
see all the
is
familiar traps.
yeah,
that
you
we've
think she's
seen,
got to have
so.
something to do with this, or like what? It's just like,
There's some kind of connection, which obviously they reveal, but yeah.
I mean, I know they've talked about like I think especially towards the end with like Saw 3D, and you have all these apprentices. I know I think they've toyed around with the idea of like, especially with these ones, the idea of like maybe like a Jigsaw cult, so to speak. Like maybe there could be other people out there trying to do that, and I could see that to an extent. Obviously, like dark web and stuff, and even people who are fans of like actual real life serial killers and stuff like that. I mean, so you could kind of understand and maybe see to an extent why you would have maybe some forum out there of like, people obsessing over the Jigsaw stuff and be like, oh, people just wanting to get crafty, wanting to build this stuff just because they're a little bit odd that way.
Well,
so to an extent, I could kind of go with that. Obviously here, especially with this girl in particular, it seems a bit out there. I mean, she's like a literal red herring because of her red hair and all that shit too. And,
But I guess I can see that whole aspect because, I mean, that, like you mentioning real life serial killers like Gacy and all that, and people get interested in that not because he killed people, but like the how and the why, the psychological aspect. So I can see that as like a, gray area realm of possibility here that they're trying to delve into. So yeah, with her being fascinated by that, how he did all these things, mechanically, and yeah, I can totally get that.
Yeah.
Just not that her wanting to actually kill people, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, everybody needs a hobby.
Yeah, I guess so. I can get that angle. I can.
I mean, I can see what they were. I mean, I feel like that was more so probably also like if this one had done like very, very well, and if they wanted to try to continue on in the series, it opens up a Pandora's box of possibilities of like other Jigsaw killers potentially. Like you can obviously see it's just like, oh well, there's could be someone out there in this area that could be doing this stuff because obviously, yeah, they have plans online. They could easily build the stuff if they wanted to, and if they wanted to go forth trying to do this elaborate stuff, they could. So it kind of opens up that idea of like,
they
I guess
can take
other
those general
killers,
ideas, modify them, do their own thing.
Yeah,
do
so
it
they
in
can,
the
like I said,
same
explain away
spirit of it,
more
I
people
can
if they
get
wanted
it,
to continue
yeah.
the series and stuff like that. And so yeah, with that going on, and like I said, the cops, like the one partner, he sees that they were there together and all of that stuff, and so he starts, trying to bring in Logan and question him about it. But then Logan's sitting there pointing the finger at O'Halloran, which is, they definitely push towards him being like a dirty cop. And so again, you're just kind of like, okay, well, who is doing this? Who's the involvement? Like I said, what's the end game of all this, especially with the whole other game going on? We still don't really know for sure. And so yeah, going back to the games, this is where so the one dude's out of the picture basically because his leg's all jacked up, and so the one guy and girl they kind of go on about, and then the one guy has to go into the game where his backstory is like he sold what happens to be Jigsaw's nephew, which is a bit random, I guess, but I guess they wanted to have some
They had to pull something out of a hat.
ties to make it more personal, I guess, which like yeah, a bit random, but it's like, hey, I guess, I mean, if this happened to his nephew where he sold him a faulty bike, and so just shortly after he wrecks and dies, it's like, man, John Kramer really had a fucked up life. I mean, hell, like fucking like lost his child, got divorced, got cancer, lost his nephew because some asshole sold him. But it's like, man, he has the worst fucking luck. I can see why he'd be doing this shit, I guess, And so yeah, so that whole game is it's a giant. Basically a giant blender, like a giant twister. The guy has to
spiral.
It has to get lower down and not touch the edges, kind of like Operation as well, and like grab a part down there or whatever, and
grab the brake.
Yeah, grab the handbrake and stop the device.
The very brake that killed the kids. So.
Yeah, and so he has to do that, and then the one woman, she's trying to give him the assist and everything. At one point, she shoves like a rod and like a bike that's kind of helping propel it at the top. Doesn't work for too long because shortly after he gets paraded like a fucking and so it doesn't end well. Which, how do you feel about that one? I mean, you have all the kills in this
the death one. Or the trap, or yeah.
Well, yeah, both really, because I mean, if you look at it, it's like even for Jigsaw, it's like that's pretty elaborate because it's huge and it's like damn, okay.
Yeah, that thing was pretty cool. I mean, I'd say it's probably on the level of oh gosh, well, I mean, the rack was pretty insane too.
Yeah. But even by comparison, that's rather simplistic. It's like small, like all you gotta do is like wind some gear and just tie someone to it, and it's just. But this is like fucking 20 feet high, and it's like these blades like all along, and it's like wow. It's like even for Jigsaw, like okay then.
But I mean, just as a standout sort of thing, you're gonna remember that versus the people being trapped in the grain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then obviously the guy getting. Well, yeah, puree.
Yeah, see, that's the thing about the traps in this one is like they're elaborate but at the same time simplistic, if that makes sense. Like the engineering of them, like even in the first room where they start off, it's just like these chains pulling them into the wall, and it says all you have to do is offer up some blood. So the tiniest little cut, it didn't matter. It's not like you had to go and get yourself decapitated in the thing to get through, like that, like the chain pulling, and it's like all throughout the barn up, like at least from those first two sequences. So you have like that going and stuff, and it's like, it's pretty, like I said, simplistic in design. You look at it, but like I said, elaborate within the actual nature of engineering it all in a sense. So like I said, this one is kind of like that same thing. It's just
where the other room, a spiral too.
Yeah, and like where the other one's just like grain falling on you and some tools and shit. Like
that's obviously, well, I guess pretty simple in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like I said, that one has a nice result, and again, it's just shortly after the fact we see that body pops up in the room while the cops are going out investigating.
If you can call it a body.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly not much left of them. And so again, going throughout, like I said, the bodies are just popping up on the outside. Even it gets to a point where it's just like, okay, is Jigsaw really dead? Because they're finding like his blood underneath the fingernails of victims and stuff like that, and they even dig up his grave, and they find that the one dude from the beginning of the film that the cops chased after and killed him, his body is down in there, and they're just like, oh shit. So what the fuck is going on? Is Jigsaw back from the dead? Like, is he a zombie? What is happening? Now at this point, like, what were you thinking? Did you have any sense of idea? Like, were you leaning towards one thing or the other?
What is going on?
Where were you with it? Like, anyone?
That's kind of where I was like.
Did you have a prime suspect at all? I'm just curious.
I mean, obviously you think of, okay, coroner guy, cop guy, what's going on here? The girl, I mean, because, she built the stuff. So it was like a triangle there. But then the whole digging up the grave thing, I'm like, all right, what the hell?
Yeah, I mean, because even she built that. Because you see in she had that built.
Yeah, she replicated it because it was... Yeah,
I'm like I remember her talking about it. These people are just too smart for their own good, kids, because they're just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
They can just do all this shit. And so, yeah, okay, so you get to the culmination of like the main barn game because she's able like to kind of get outside the barn door a little bit, but then you see a pig masked figure out there waiting for them, and so they get syringed like we've seen before, and then they wake up in another room, and then shortly after that we get to reveal that it is actually John Kramer. And so yeah, so Tobin Bell is back here with speaking his mind about what the deal is there, and come to find out the one female in the game, her backstory was is that her husband was drunk one night. He was in bed, laying there with the baby, and that he had rolled over and suffocated it. And then cops took him away and, put him in a ward somewhere. And then he eventually hung himself because he couldn't handle the depression of it. But the twist of that is that she herself was just all messed up one night and getting pissed off because the baby was screaming and shit. So she had suffocated the baby and planted the baby in the bed and said that her husband had rolled over, which is pretty jacked up because it turns out that John was actually her neighbor. And so he was, would hear them, arguing or whatever and blah, blah, blah. And so.
Which, by the way, a quick side note, postpartum depression is a very serious thing. So always reach out, talk to somebody. Anyway.
Oh, yeah. And so, so this is, like, again, just kind of expanding John's lore as to who he's tied to, and like I said, what's kind of getting him started and everything. And it's just like, these are some pretty dirty people in this game. And with the other guy, it's just kind of like all throughout his life, he's just kind of been reckless, like younger, just friends joyriding in a car and stuff, and then they happen to wreck because of some shit that he did or whatever. And so, yeah, with that, and it's like, so he's like going back and forth, which again, it's always great to have these moments, just watching him and his dialogue, just talking with these people. And it's a great scene, just kind of listening to him and, kind of having these situations. So how'd you feel about like that twist as far as like, to see what the deal was with her throughout,
Yeah, it was somewhere in there where I really, like I said, when they dug up the body and then, he appears and I'm like, what on earth is going on? That's why I was so confused. And then it was mentioned, I don't know, somewhere in between there when the cops were doing their investigating, it's like the last two bodies were never found from the final trap. Because, we're, like you were saying, we're finding the body. But, the guy and the girl, they were never found. So, as the last little bit progressed, and then the flip, and then I'm like, oh. Yeah, this one was definitely very confusing for me, but it was, though always hearing from him and getting the story is fascinating, honestly.
Well, as one line he says, like, the game's simple, the best ones are, and so this one is just like what their final test was, is that
this is the key.
He's like, here's your key to freedom. It's a shotgun shell, and then it's just like, you've had it all backwards. And then so, the final game, he puts the shell in the shotgun. And it's just like, hey, you two, because they're chained up on the walls, like, have at it. Make your choice. And then so with her, I mean, she comes to the decision that she's going to shoot the other guy. And then last second, he's like, wait, we have it backwards. And he's like, nope, don't do that. And then bam. Fucking shell blasts her face all to hell, and so she's dead. And then he makes the discovery that the key was actually embedded in the shell itself.
Literally the key.
Yeah, like, and it's just like, you poor bastard. And he's stuck in there. He's got to die. And it's just like, well, actually, like I said, despite his past, like, I actually feel bad for him more than any of them. And it's just like, yeah, because he didn't deserve it. Because he didn't ask like to try to get shot. It's like, she is just a straight up bitch. Like, she has no care for human life whatsoever. It's like she is just straight to like just wanting to kill someone.
Cold.
Just cold blood. So yeah, she kind of deserved that. Him probably not so much, but hey,
no, because
their fates were tied. So I mean,
he made that.
Fucked,
he made that connection, and then obviously she made that connection.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and so following that, you have Logan, you have Holleran, and them like all at the barn and everything, and then
investigating, trying to figure out. Oh, okay, it led them to the barn. So what's going on here?
And so like the previous two, they get attacked from behind, and so they're tied up to these collars on the wall. And Jigsaw comes on the soundboard saying that oh, you know, all you have to do is basically tell the truth. You know, fess up to what sins you think you like might be here for. And Logan's just like, okay, yeah, I did it. I screwed up. I screwed up John's X-rays. I mixed them up to where, yeah, he could have been diagnosed earlier on with the cancer and possibly saved, but due to careless mistake, that's
An honest mistake, I think.
Yeah.
Isn't that? I think that's what they called it. But
Yeah, well,
anyway.
either or. I mean, yes, yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, and so that was that, and so you see that he still gets, because this the collar, it has all the the little mini lasers that they used earlier, to like cut parts off the body and stuff like that, and so it's just a bunch of those around, laser going up to the wall, and so you see that supposedly he gets killed, and it's just like, nope, that's not it, Chief, and then O'Halloran, he's his fess up is just like, yeah, like I've done some dirty shit. He's just like, oh yeah, I let these guys go because they're informants for me and blah blah blah. And so his collar shuts off, and then Logan himself rises up from the ground after this blood splatter effect, in which, yeah, you do see it. You're just like, yeah, like, because the laser, like, supposed to cut through, right? And so, because all he has is just blood splatter, because it goes down over your face, and then it just, like, explodes around his neck. So you're just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, I see. He was just fucking around and shit. And so you see that Logan is the one actually doing all of this. And so at that moment, what were you thinking?
Oh, snap. Because the whole laser thing was pretty cool to begin with. And then, they show with the collar around him, it wasn't making any holes in the ceiling.
Yeah, he makes a discovery after he supposedly
guy,
died. He looks up and he's just like, wait a second.
There's
like, the fuck?
There's nothing up there.
Yeah, and so like Logan gets up, and then yeah, he's the new Jigsaw, so he goes about explaining all of it. So what happens is that, yeah, he was the one who mixed up John's X-rays, so that did happen, and then so that's what caused him to be in the game that we've been following all throughout. In the beginning, he was the fifth person in that, but it was all like 10 years prior to this. So this was an OG game. So this was before
the game before the game.
Yeah. So this was before everything. And then so, because he was like passed out all in the start of that up until like the very end and shit. So we never saw what happened to him. And so, yeah, he actually gets cut up his back quite a bit. And you do see a shot earlier on.
Oh yeah, about the head. Yeah.
Yeah, that his back is all scarred up and stuff. But given they've talked back and forth about him like being in the war and stuff, so you just assume those are like war wounds and stuff. And so so the tie-in is that he was actually in that game, but then John immediately runs in and saves him once everyone's in the next room. He's just like, you shouldn't have to die over an honest mistake. And so that's what him saying, narrating over that. And so he heals him up, and then so basically Logan is a full-on like Jigsaw like apprentice. Like he was he predated Hoffman, he predated Amanda, Gordon, all of them. Like he was an OG. And so yeah, you're going through that whole thing, and then like, yeah, you just have all these shots of Jigsaw talking to him, and you see that he actually building stuff. Yeah, just building up that whole ending. And you see
this whole time I'm like, how does he make all this stuff? Especially, like I said, the rack. That thing is, very complex in a way, with the the machines and the turning and the, oh my goodness. Yeah. It was pretty intense.
Yeah, I mean, they have this moment where Jigsaw's like, we can never come from anger or from vengeance. And it's like, you taught me that. And Logan's like, but then there will be no justice. And he's like, but there will, because we'll speak for the dead. And together we built a legacy. And then bam, reverse bear trap. So he helped him build the reverse bear trap, the very, like OG iconic Saw trap. And so tying all that in, and it's just like, well, shit. It's just like everything you thought you knew, you didn't quite know. It's like, no, there was even more to that. So with all that having, kind of going through and being revealed as this is playing out, what was in your head? You're like, does that make sense to you? Or is it like,
I guess just the way it went about and trying to go back and forth confused me, and then that kind of just tied everything up. I mean, I was still, in the confused bit, but thinking about like all the movies as a whole, they probably would have been fine like right there because that like tied it all up. I mean, yeah, the other guys had happened and they did their things, Amanda and Hoffman, whatever, but that just kind of tied it all up. But as much as I want to go back and watch these movies because I like them, I know what happens, and it's like, well.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, with these movies, especially with like the first
I
one, it's like
can't-
it can
I
never
can't
be
go
the,
back and
it can never
watch
it can
them.
never be the same like on a
No.
second viewing after you experience it
No,
the first time.
rewatching.
It's one of those movies like it's well, like that first one's like it's one of those things where it's like you wish you could just kind of erase your memory and just experience it again for the first time because just like it just give you like what the fuck.
Yeah, the very first movie especially that was awesome. And then with Spiral, because we did watch it again just because, and I'm like, I know what's coming, but it's still really good, and the traps are good, but I know what happens, so it just kind of, I mean, I can't rewatch these. That's what kind of sucks about it.
Yeah, I mean, well, okay, well, to finish it off, okay, so you see that that's what the deal was, and so his deal with Halloran, and for more in-depth detail, is that, like, so yeah, Halloran has had, like, the guy that was killed at the beginning, and it showed that Logan was actually there after they had shot him, because he was, like, across on another rooftop, and he had this all planned out and timed and everything, and so all the voices, like the Jigsaw voice that you've heard was all, like, him going back and I guess maybe like old audio files and stuff that he manipulated to make it seem like Jigsaw is back. And so yeah, he had shot Munson as they shot him with like the same like bullet that Halloran uses and everything to kind of help set him up to make it seem like he's actually the one doing all of these killings, because that guy as well, even he says that he killed his wife and all of this stuff. And so like says this is kind of, even though they say it's not about like vengeance and all this stuff, like this is him getting back at him for all the crappy things that he's done to people and all of that. And so that he had actually recreated the game that we've been seeing go on. He said he had like 3 people, gave them like the same options and stuff like that, which again is rather elaborate because you're thinking like, okay, so you have to have like 3 identical people and all of this stuff and kind of have them die the same. So I'm not exactly sure. Again, it's kind of maybe a bit of a reach, like how that all would have played out or how he got it to play out the way that he needed to.
Yeah, that.
But again, it's still interesting though. It's just like it's like, okay, well, yeah, you're one clever motherfucker. And so yeah, as a whole elaborate setup, and again, and clearly it shows that yeah, Logan hasn't been in the picture the whole time. Like he maybe have helped him initially, but gone off, lived his life, and done his thing, but maybe has had ties to John this whole time and blah blah blah, and he saw something that he had to deal with Halloran and all this, and so yeah, I mean, he basically leaves Halloran to sit there and deal with his sins, and he activates the collar and slowly comes down, splices his head all the fucking like pieces and shit, drops down to his knees, and he's dead. And Logan's like, I speak for the dead, slams that door in the iconic fashion, and like that's that. So
Yeah, that was super gross. Banana peel.
yeah, I mean, they say like yeah, as far as like even like a small laser like that, technology wise, it's like we probably still a ways off to be able to develop that in such a way. But for this film, it's just like yeah, it's like that's fine. It's 10 years later, we're trying to go a little bit more sleeker and a little bit. It's still a cool trap, I think, and it left for one hell of an effect. So it's just like, yeah,
Yeah,
nothing.
speaking of effect, the blood definitely didn't look fake.
No, I mean you could tell like yeah, the head was CGI, but it was still enough.
So
it looked good enough
gross.
to where it's just like damn, dude.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's where we leave you. And so, final thoughts on it all, and
The series as a whole was very, very interesting. It's a thinky slasher, for sure. It makes you think, and you kind of want to relate to Kramer because of his reasoning and he's just a fascinating character. And like I said, I I enjoyed the movies, but I can't go back and rewatch them because I know what happens. It's not like any other movie that I've seen that I've some of them dozens and dozens of times. I can watch and watch and watch. I can't. They were good. So
I mean, like I said, that's understandable. I mean, there are like a lot of iconic movies that have like all twists and stuff like that. What, like your Sevens, your Fight Clubs, and other types of films of the sort. I mean, it's like, yeah, especially like I said, how describing these films, because like I said, being a fan from Jump and then going along, it was very episodic. It was like watching a TV show, but you had to wait a year to see the next episode and what the hell was going to happen. I mean, because as far as like scripted TV shows, I rarely, like, I may buy the seasons and stuff, but I would rarely go back and actually watch them. As much as I enjoyed it and I would like to maybe, at times maybe I would. This is kind of like that. I mean, I've seen them a bunch of times each, so it's not quite the same because, again, I enjoy, like I said, a lot of the atmosphere and, like I said, the music and just watching the endings. It's always fun as far as, like, the editing. I always love the way that they put those together because that was always one of my favorite bits of the films each and every time. Like, so even you could say what you will about the film itself or the twist itself, just always like the way that the endings are just put together. Those are always my favorite bits of the films.
yeah,
and,
that and
and I like the way
Kramer
this
doing his thing.
and
That I could rewatch, but it's just
and I like the
them as
way
a
this
whole.
one was done. I mean, again, this one's it did all right box office wise. It definitely wasn't like enough to really bring it back to do like another immediate sequel following it. And so, like I said, with this one, it definitely has a newer, sleeker look, but the film itself looks good. And I can understand, maybe some people with the twist or not with the twist. Like I said, it definitely relies more on chance in a lot of ways. But the Logan character I actually like, because like I said, with the first half of the series, they made Jigsaw more of like that villain feel. But then in the later half, it kind of shifted him more into like, in a sense, an anti-hero. Because again, with like Hoffman and all this other stuff, it just felt like it was more of like, when Dr. Gordon, where he actually kind of felt like a hero by the end of it in that sense, because he was stopping Hoffman. So it's just like, yeah, so you like the final moment, you're like, yeah, we're actually wanting to see it in this way for a certain character. And this one especially, I felt like I said, with the people in the game themselves and with Holleran, is like these are all like, pretty bad people. They've done some pretty bad things. And so I feel like they did a better job on going into that and making it seem like you can understand why these people are in the traps. And so you may not necessarily feel bad for them, but of course you want to kind of see if they can make it through it all. And so that's why I feel like I would describe this one with Logan as like Punisher-esque, because it was definitely about like stopping a certain level of corruption where he's not like in it to, for
He's
blood,
not in it to kill people.
no, like he's not in it for the thrill or anything like that. He's not looking to test like these certain people. It was actually deliberately trying to kind of like, stop a certain level of corruption. And so that's why I felt like with this one especially, it feels more of like an anti-hero type of, Jigsaw, as opposed to, like I said, any other form, even more so than John to a certain extent. Because like I said, with this one, it's just kind of, deliberate, like, okay, this person's done this, we know that's bad, this person's done this, that's definitely bad. And so that's how I kind of feel. Would you feel the same way in that way? So
I didn't really think of it like that before, but you explaining it just now, yeah, that makes complete sense.
to where it's like with Logan, it's just like I said, yeah, again, as crazy as the traps may be, like I said, you could kind of root for this character in a sense, because I feel like by the end of it, he was actually kind of likable. I was like, okay, I could kind of get behind this character. And that's kind of going in a spiral as well, where, if you look at that one, where it's kind of like another reboot and definitely more separated from the previous than even this one. It's just kind of like you definitely see the reasoning and the types of people that they're testing and putting in these things, to where it's just like, well, like, yeah, you're the villain, but you're not like a villain in that way, you know? It's just like where you can kind of see and understand, in a sense, kind of root for them and kind of want to, like you said, just kind of get behind them to a certain extent. So it kind of leaves you with that confliction of like, so it's like, okay, well, I want to root for this character, but at the same time, I kind of want to root for this character too in that way. And so that's how I felt about it. But yeah, all in all, I mean, I feel like, and the other thing too was that with this one, obviously, like I said, they made it look more modern. But even with the Saw trap, like even Billy, he had like lit up red eyes, and even the monitors when the puppet shows up, they look cleaner and crisper and all this other stuff, even though it's technically supposed to predate all the other films. I mean, I know, I guess as far as like the look of the film, I guess to keep it consistent, make it look fresher, and at the same time make the audience give you that sense like, oh yeah, this is new stuff happening, and even like the whole Blade. But if you go back and look at the earlier films, like this technically does not fit in with the aesthetic of what we've seen with the way earlier stuff. But you just kind of have to accept that for what it is, you know.
It's reminiscent of the Star Wars.
Yeah, I was
4, 5, and 6, and then they went back and did 1,
well,
2,
yeah,
and
it's
3,
like, yeah, they're
so...
prequels, but everything looks newer and cleaner. So it's just kind of like, that's just, I guess you have to accept it that way. That's just that's just how it is. But yeah, all in all, I think it's solid. I don't like I said, it served its purpose for what it was trying to do, and like I said, it's like okay all around as like a Saw fan. I think it's solid, and I definitely had fun watching it this recent time, for sure. And it did leave me curious to actually see like this Logan character kind of continue on, in that way. But I guess we kind of get that with the new Jigsaw in a sense with Spiral. Like I said, they're kind of identical in that way, but I feel like by this point, like we should just do Saw X. Like don't call it Saw 10, like Jason X. Like that was the 10th one, but it was just Jason X, and just kind of just do one ultimate film, just kind of tying in all three timelines, like Dr. Gordon, Logan, and William Shank from Spiral, and just tie it all together and just maybe just do one elaborate finale.
Yeah, how they're all intertwined and all that.
But again, that's the thing. It's like I wonder like how that would work, because the three of them together, like I said, they're more anti-heroes in that sense. So they all kind of have like the same sense idea. Like they're not like, so you would have to almost like come up with another villain as Jigsaw. So I don't know how that would work, honestly, but that's just something I have in my head. I'd be like, well, figure something out, I guess, so that's just me.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyway, yeah, that'll wrap it up for this review. I would give it a solid 3. It's just like, yeah, it's a good solid one.
Yeah,
like I said,
it was good, but the first one is obviously still my favorite, especially because of the ending. Mm-hmm. That was like the most epic moment.
Yeah. All right, so that will do it for the Saw reviews. Yep, that's it until maybe a Spiral 2. I don't know. Or Saw X eventually. We'll see what happens. We don't know. But yes, thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.